Now let me move on to the next panel of the day. The FMCG and the FMCD sector had more, I mean, the most new entrants would be aware of. All you guys who are watching us today would be aware of the sector and specifically sales and marketing profiles because you would have heard them even if you're not preparing for your MBA, right? While the sector has many takers, only a few are able to make a mark in this sector and especially in this profile. So in this segment, we will dive into how to build a successful sales and marketing career in top FMCG and FMCD companies. And today we have with us Mohit Agrawal, who is Chief Manager at Asian Paints, Akshay Murthy, who is Brand Manager Ashirwad ITC, Xenia Shroff, she is Manager Garnier India at L'Oreal, Ashwin Shukla, he is the head HR operations and technology at Marico, Gautam Rishi, marketing manager, healthcare Reckitt. And again, you'll have to see me as the moderator. Now, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My first question is to you, Akshay. We have seen that a great marketeer needs to understand the nuances of sales. I mean, everybody talks about it, the sales cycle, the margins and all, how do you hit the retailer or so. First of all, how true is this statement? And if it is true, how important is for a new person, a management trainee to move, first of all, into the sales path before moving on to marketing and branding?
See, the point that you're saying between sales and marketing, yeah, I mean, that's a mixed bag, honestly, and I'm not trying to play the fence sitter here. It kind of varies. You know, I have people in my team who are, who are into marketing, who are in my team and who've not done sales at all. And they seem to be doing pretty good for themselves. But personally, and I can only speak for myself, when, I started my career in sales in ITC and then moved into branding. And that has actually kind of helped. There are certain nuances which are there, which only if you're in a sales front, you'll be able to appreciate. For example, you'll have a really good product that you have and you want to communicate the nuances. But if you don't know how does the order capture happen at the sales call by the salesman, how is the trade going to react to a particular scheme that you're going to deploy? Or, what is the kind of real estate that you have in the outlet to communicate whatever you want to communicate? These are some certain nuances which you'll pick up only, at least for me, I picked it up only because of my sales stint, interacting with those retailers. And that kind of helps me optimize my messaging. Brevity is very important. You have to be crisp. So what sort of messaging, how to talk, the eyeline, those kinds of things have actually helped me in good stead. So to summarize, if you were to ask me that, can you be a good marketeer? Is it necessary to have done sales to be a good marketeer? Not necessary. I don't think so. But does it help to have done sales before you do marketing? I think so, yes. I mean, it's actually helped me quite a bit. So yeah, that's
so
how I would.
Again, attached to that, right? Because you're saying that marketeers need to be attached to the sales cycle, right? Do you also think that if you have built your career in marketing, right, it will always help to be in touch with the sales cycle? So let's say in 12 months, you basically take up at least a month or you have regular meetings with the retailers to understand their viewpoint, like you do inside closed group studies or so.
You must, I mean, you're completely right. As in, we do that. It is actually very essential that you go on these market visits to get a perspective of, what the trade is saying. More than what most research agencies can tell you. And, most of these research data, at least the trade leg, the distribution leg comes with a lag. You'll be able to pick up those nuances when you interact with the trade, in terms of how a particular category functions, what are the nuances with respect to pricing, is there any seasonality? It really helps to actually have that touch with trade. It is completely necessary, in my opinion, to have that. And, one must have that connection.
Also, another question, and I'm sure this question is coming from students. Sales, when people take in people for sales and marketing role, they assign boys to sales and girls to marketing. Is that a trend or it's completely open?
See, if you're, and I see a couple of the panelists smiling. Yeah, see, to be honest, in sales, there is a lot that needs to be done. I mean, and it's actually true. You do have, I mean, that kind of a skew did exist. there are certain roles in sales which has started opening up. And I'm saying that girls are kind of disadvantaged, but now certain roles, for example, roles which are based out of metros, for example, CAM roles, those kinds of roles are getting opened up. At least in competition companies, I see in ITC for that matter, we have had people who have been in active sales, but then is that number adequate, sufficient? I don't think so. I mean, that skew still exists, but has it changed? For sure, it has. I mean, over the last 2-3 years, it has kind of changed. And I think the onus lies completely on organizations like us. You have to make sure that when you are on a sales stint, you have to tour up-country markets. How do you ensure that you kind of make it comfortable for your employees, for their travel, for their safety, for their well-being? And that is the responsibility of organizations like us. But to answer your question in short, is there a skew? Does it exist? Yes, it does. I mean, but has it changed? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's kind of happening in the last, I would say, 3-4 years. I've spent about 10 years with ITC now, and I see that mix kind of actively changing and changing for the better in the last 3-4 years, in my opinion.
Awesome. Coming to you, Gautam, you have been with Reckitt for almost a decade now, and you have joined right after college. I mean, my alma mater, IMT, and you have both worked in India and outside India. Can you outline your overall experience, how this experience of a decade has shaped you professionally as well as personally in this career, and what has been the growth journey?
Sure, Ankit. So last 10 years that I've grown with Reckitt, I think one thing I can very easily say, while the names have changed of the company, it used to be Reckitt Benckiser 10 years back, then it became RB because Reckitt Benckiser used to be a tongue twister. I could not pronounce Reckitt Benckiser for a long time. People could not even email us because it used to be @ Reckitt Benckiser. The spelling mistakes were there. So we moved to RB, now we are Reckitt. But one thing which has not changed in Reckitt is the core fundamental of how it works, which now we call freedom to succeed. So that's how we term it. But what it really means is it's an attitude which pushes us to take charge of our work and career. And that's been since day one. I've seen it, and that's been the core of the company since it started decades back. That hasn't really changed. So what it means is, I very often say this, that philosophically this is basically free will. That you are in charge of your work, you are in charge of your career, and that's a great thing about Reckitt that I've grown up with, and that's given me a personality as well, because eventually what happens is very quickly you will be put in an uncomfortable position. And initially I was terrified because I have a tech background, and for 4-5 years I worked in a tech industry, and I moved completely, switched, and here I was in FMCG, and I said, this is the worst decision in my life. What have I done? I will not survive here, even for a year. And what happened was that with the uncomfortable position also came the stretching and learning. And as you'll read in so many books, and when you exercise, your muscles ache for the first time, and that's when you realize that you're pushing yourself and you're growing. That's a very similar thing here as well, which I have seen in Reckitt, specifically, that you're out of your comfort zone. So your stint is done, you'll be moved very quickly. You're comfortable in one location, you'll be moved to another location. Where am I? What am I doing here? And then so these things happen. That's how 10 years have just gone by, that's how it is. If you have an appetite to be uncomfortable and go beyond comfort zone, that's what it teaches you.
And trust me, Gautam, my key takeaway and for students would have been that you're from a tech background, because I see some of the questions, and one question I'll quote: coming from a tech background with 3 years of work ex, would FMCG even consider me? So I think because Gautam is here in this panel itself, that question is settled. Yes, even if you're from a tech background, you can be considered. But tell me, any number of experience, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, because many a times people say that only freshers are, 0 to 1 year people are preferred in FMCG. Is that true?
No, so it comes out to boils down to your decision. So I worked for about 5 years, 4.5, 5 years. So maybe it was slightly a late decision, I would say. Normally in first 2-3 years you would decide that I want to go move my career from tech. So I took about 4 years. What you said was very true, because initially in the campus round, I wasn't even considered because they said, hey, he's too old for the fresher role. But eventually, what you bring in, and actually you make this your strength, because you have that you have that work experience. You know how to deal with a lot of situations which the freshers don't. So you take that as an advantage, and you would actually be far better than so many others if you have that experience behind you.
I think that you've already spread hope to all the tech guys who are incoming, because very frankly, the questions generally come from them. Okay, now coming to you, Ashwin. So all FMCGs have huge products, right? Some hygiene, packaged foods, cosmetics, grooming. What are the common qualities that an employee will get irrespective of the product line that they're working with?
Right. So Ankit, as an organization, what we would want to be focusing on is ensuring that anybody who joins the organization, gets a holistic business understanding from an FMCG construct. From the time that they join, right, to the multiple exposures that then get planned for each of them, in the coming years. It would all build up to gaining varied exposures, from a trade construct, be it general trade, be it modern trade, be it e-com, right? Along with that, also a thorough understanding of brands, right? So that's the kind of exposure that we would look at from a functional understanding. Alongside this, there are certain cultural tenets that we would want each of our members to experience. So something like empowerment for us is critical. Early responsibility is something that's very critical and ingrained to Marico. And also experiencing and living the Marico values, right? So these are some of the experiences that anybody who's joining the organization would look to gain.
Sure. Thanks, Ashwin. Coming to you, Xenia. So, see, L'Oreal, when we always think about FMCG, right, everybody thinks about direct to consumer brands, B2C brands, right? L'Oreal is one company that has a different line altogether for professionals, which is a B2B line. How different it is from a normal FMCG company or a product line or a sales and marketing role in a B2C firm or B2C line within L'Oreal versus a B2B line within L'Oreal, and how the roles are completely different from each other.
So thank you for that question. Yes, Ankit, that is peculiar to L'Oreal on the panel here today. So see, L'Oreal is the #1 beauty company in the world. Okay, and it's our mission to create beauty that moves the world, to invent the future of beauty. And with that mission, we are present across beauty categories, across price points, with multiple brands. And of course, in every channel in which a consumer searches for or buys her beauty products and services. So the salon is obviously an integral space where a consumer goes to fulfill her beauty needs. So we have a large and a very strong professional products division that plays in this segment. Now, when it comes to roles in this division versus the consumer products division, if I were to, very, very simplistically sketch out a traditional marketing role today, what do? We understand our categories, we understand our markets, we understand the depths of our consumers, we learn valuable insights. And from there, we create products that answer specific consumer needs. We put them at the right price. We find ways to communicate these products to consumers. We create great activations, be it offline or online, to engage the consumers, to build trial, to build retention, build brand love. So simplistically put, this is what marketers in the salon division do as well. So although the buyers of these products are technically salon owners, the products and services are still created to cater to consumer needs. So marketing still creates campaigns to engage the consumers. Activations online or offline are still created to target the end consumer. So the difference is you may not see a TV commercial just yet from the professional products division, but you will see social media, you will see influencers, you will see POS materials in store. In fact, today PPD has made an entry on e-commerce, on social commerce. So, as the world becomes more O+O or offline plus online, as we say, these lines are blurring, and the roles in that sense are not so different today.
Sure. Also, there's a question from the audience, and I think you might want to take this up. what is the most important quality required for aspiring brand managers? And when I say you, it's best that you take it up, because I mean, both from the B2C and the B2B market, the qualities won't change per se, right?
Yeah, so I think the qualities that we look for when we're hiring, on campus or laterally, it's really, first of all, I would say passion, great attitude, ambition, a hunger to succeed. That's really the energy that the candidate, shares with us in an interview. It's palpable. And for me, from moment one, when you see that energy, from a candidate or from a student, you're already honed in and you're already listening with ears wide open. Second is for a brand manager, it's definitely, I would say, discipline, rigor, but at the same time always fresh thinking, because that's what I think we look for. When students come in, we don't want a jaded old perspective. That's what all of us are there for, those who have been in the industry for 8, 10, 12, 15 years. So we're looking for fresh thinking. And I think something that I personally also always look for is a very strong sense of team collaboration. We work together, we succeed together. I don't achieve anything on my own. So, sometimes it's very important to gauge that for me in an interview as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mohit, coming to you next. See, Asian Paints is one of those companies that hold hands with both FMCG and FMCD. What are the key differentiating factors for these two industries? How are they similar? How are they different?
Okay, so well, if I talk about FMCG, I think one of the things that I think what happens is that the purchase cycle for consumer is very more often, right? And therefore, what is happening? The material is also moving off the shelf of retailer and even at consumers at a very fast speed, right? While in FMCG, what is happening that it is more calculated decision. So generally, what will happen in FMCG, somebody would have purchased material out of a product out of a necessity, right? In case of FMCG, he has thought about it. He has got his disposable income. Then he's making that decision. So if I have to talk about what it matters for the company, is that from an FMCG standpoint, a company would have to invest possibly slightly more in terms of always being tuned to what consumers want, because it's changing very fast and he's interacting with you more often than in FMCG sort of space. So that's one. If I talk about FMCG, what is happening? Therefore, since he's talking about a lot of functional qualities, making more calculated decision, and therefore there the role of influencer becomes very important. So it could be, let's say, a dealer, it could be anybody, even today Quora is an influencer for that matter, right? So I'm saying the role of influencer becomes very important, and therefore yes, they are very similar industries in some manner, but these are some of the nuances which separate them apart. Well, if I talk about, let's say, we take an example of Asian Paint, which I think, since you mentioned that it holds hands with both, I think one of the things which is there is that paint obviously is a slightly more durable product than, let's say, a biscuit at home, right? But what happens is that the way the distribution today happens at Asian Paints, and I think not many stories are there about it, how fast we can replace material at a dealer's store, or the amount of investment that we do or building brand is very much FMCG-like, right? But at the same time, if I talk about the FMCD quality, which is like the kind of relationship we would have with our dealer, the contractor who's painting our house, is of a different order altogether. And a lot of insights we gather from there. So I think this is a very unique mix in that sense that, and that possibly, if you ask me, it is the secret ingredient for success of Asian Paints also. And yeah, so that's about it.
Okay. And also tell me something. So this question has come from, because you do a lot of celebrity marketing as well, right? The question from the audience is that are celebrity-based marketing really effective in return on investment? I know it's too technical, but people are asking, and the other guys are upvoting.
So I'll give you a very technical answer to this. The celebrity cost in terms of any media investment, it's very limited part of it. It is actually the media cost. Okay, so the technical answer is that. But if I talk about brand building, celebrities do play a part, obviously. So it depends on the brand. But I think the key factor, again from a technical standpoint, is your brand persona has to match the celebrity persona. And that is
I think celebrities are nothing but, I think, one extension of influencers, right? Nowadays, I mean, I think just after the COVID lockdown last year, right? I was reading an article which said that companies are now going towards celebrity advertising because now they'll be using things themselves and other people will be sort of copying or getting influenced by them. Okay. Now coming to Akshay. Akshay, again, an extension of the question that I asked earlier. According to our campus employee branding survey that we did about 2 months back, there was a difference between what males prefer as their top choices of the domains that they want to work in versus females. Females was top right FMCG, right, sales and marketing, whereas males was something else. Do you think that as a company or as a segment, FMCG or so, has anything changed because of which this preference has shifted to FMCG for females?
See, I don't think much has, I mean, yes, there's been some change. For example, like I was mentioning the last 3-4 years, but as such, say, for example, if you were to look at hardcore marketing per se, and now more so in the last 1.5 years where everything is now possible remote. Yeah, I mean, when I came into branding, I never thought that a market visit or a retailer interaction is possible over, over Zoom or over video call. But no, the point is, what's also happened is I think organizations over time have kind of become more accommodating of aspirations of people. One, for example, personal aspirations and your work-life balance, personal aspirations, domestic requirements per se, or the ability to work out of locations. Earlier in sales, and I can talk for my organization in particular, you would had field offices which were upcountry, Jabalpur and upcountry in Kashmir, and not everyone was wanting to travel. And not just, and this got nothing to do with males or females. I think you would ask any guy or a girl out there, they would all want to kind of work, not far away from their families. They have their their requirements as well. Secondly, the fact that there used to be, I think over course of time, what's also evolved and changed is the fact that organizations have started becoming more merit oriented. Meritocracy has kind of crept in, and inherent cognitive and unconscious biases have kind of been kind of eliminated. So you, in the sense that even when you're having your career conversations or your appraisal discussions that's happening, you would find that people are more open to points of view which are very different from yours, and not allowing biases to keep in, which are very, very subjective and individual oriented. So that's also kind of led to an increase in preference for FMCG, I would say. Yeah. The third and the last point that I think why FMCG is now becoming a core aspect or a core preference, I would say, and I don't know whether I can answer between males and females because I don't know what the males prefer. I certainly wanted to do FMCG marketing when I passed out of IFT. But yeah, the point being that at the end of the day, the joy of solving for an inherent consumer need and being able to work in a segment or a category which solves for daily, not everyone possibly, and with all due respect to, members from previous panels and here, not probably everyone can understand whether it's an SEC, C consumer or D consumer, may not necessarily understand how e-commerce works, right? But everyone understands the nitty-gritties or rather interacts with products like soaps and shampoos and, beauty products or, paint or food for that matter. And therefore you'd find people, wanting, or the lure of FMCG, at least for me, I can say, is I'm very familiar with these concepts, products, and I think that is the other reason why people would want to opt for FMCG vis-a-vis some other sector.
And Gautam, linked to this diversity, right? Now that's also a buzzword. Now, companies value diversity, both, gender, background, ethnicity, all of it, right? Because as you want to grow and have more markets, you need to have more people that understand those markets, right? At Reckitt, how do you groom people for those diverse backgrounds for leadership positions?
Right, Ankit, I think, like you said, if we are serving consumers and you have mass products and not just specialized products, then your consumer is not just one gender, right? Your consumer is across gender, across background, education, SECs, region. So I think the companies have started understanding that a lot more, and that's why a lot more inclusion also, and you see that happening in the workforce. At Reckitt, there are so many initiatives. I think a couple of them, top of my head. One is, for example, the gender pay report. I think Reckitt was initially the first one to start doing that, where now we every year give a gender pay report. There is a gap, but the problem is solved once you understand what the problem is. So step one was accepting that there was a problem and then openly talking about it. And now that we've committed to talking about it every year and showing out a report, it helps fix that problem as well. Then there are a lot of other initiatives. Like I was part of the parental support, so I got a parental leave for not just a week. Initially, there used to be for fathers, they used to get 3 days off, and it was a joke that why 3? Why are you even giving us 3 days, right? And it used to be all around, not just in one company. Everybody was like this: give them 3 days off, and they should be happy. And so I was part of the parental support, where I actually got not just 1, 2, 3 days, but a couple of weeks off, and that changed so much between the relationship as well, because suddenly you also realize that it's not always one way, and a lot of times employees feel that I'm working day and night. What am I getting out other than just the check that I get at the end of the month? Here is the time when you really need the support and when you start getting support. So I think that's a huge part which Reckitt has also worked on. Then the third is you very nicely, I think you talked about it, the women in sales aspect. That's a separate group in RB in Reckitt, where there's a support system where all the previous women who've come in sales and have graduated and have, that's a core group which now support the new people who are coming in, or the new women who are coming in sales, because all these questions keep coming up, right? That how will I make this happen? How will I do it? What will my family say? What will be the safety aspect? How will I speak to 20 people who are reporting to me? Because when you go to sales, you have so many people who are looking up to you. How will I handle that? So now that you have a core support who's done that, been there, are really growing in the company, when the new person joins in, the new girl joins in, who's a fresher, they are very, very, very easily handled, because you're connected to them. And the first day you speak to this whole group and you see 20 wonderful women who've done wonderfully well in the company. They're talking about their experiences and they show their vulnerability, right? And when these leaders talk about how vulnerable they were, how difficult it was for them, it becomes very real. They also believe that, yes, what I'm going through or what I'll go through is also real, and I'll be okay. The company's got my back.
Thanks, Gautam. Coming to you, Ashwin. Now, this is regarding identifying a skill, right? At heart, many people love working for FMCGs because they have actually grown up using those products and can relate with the consumers, right? And I think in the interviews as well, this comes along. Empathizing with the end consumer is easier said than done. And even if you have been the consumer for years, how do you identify this sort of very, very specific skill in a potential candidate? Because nowadays this is coming handy for all the FMCG companies, and specifically sales and marketing domain.
Right. So thanks, Ankit. So I think empathy, like you rightly put, being able to put yourself in the consumer's shoes is important, right? An individual's ability perhaps to identify, what exactly is the emotional need, understanding the reasons behind, that need, and then responding to it, right? Effectively is what's critical, right? Some of the aspects that we would typically want to delve into is so number one would be what sort of actions has an individual taken in order to understand the consumer, their lives, right? And the kind of insights that they've generated, in this entire process. I think delivering fresh ideas through consumer interactions, right, in order to perhaps maybe build or reshape ongoing plans within the organization, or perhaps ideas for product development and product research is another aspect that we would want to look at. I think third would be the kind of role that an individual plays or actions that they end up taking across, say, a product development cycle is something that we would want to understand more during our interactions. And lastly, how has an individual worked towards building a culture of consumer centricity, right, and creating that shift in perhaps the current organization, current work areas, peers, is another aspect that we would want to understand during our interactions with people.
Sure. Thanks, Ashwin. Coming to you, Xenia. In B School, some students aren't really sure about whether sales and marketing is for them. And that is true, not only for this domain. Primarily, they hear things. They think that, hey, let's go into this because of glamour or so. But let's say, how do a person identify that if sales and marketing is for them?
Okay. So what I can say, and like you mentioned, the glamour, Ankit, I can say that marketing is not all about the fluff. It's not all about the creativity. I often have people in an interview say, I want to do marketing and I think I'm going to be really good at it because I'm very creative. And then, they have nothing creative to say after that. So it's not all about that. It's a lot of consumer insighting. There's science behind it. It's I said rigor and discipline earlier because there's a lot of project management involved, forecasting, sizing of business opportunities, building business plans for new launches, people management, agency management, a lot of business management, because ultimately as you grow up, the P&L of the brand is yours to drive and build and own. So, this is some of what, goes into being a marketer. But for choosing whether sales and marketing is the right career choice for you, I can sit here and tell you by the book, why marketing or why sales. But the truth is, I know people who have made that decision also by process of elimination. Finance, I can't do. HR is not for me. Ops, I don't like. So, hey, marketing. So I would recommend to students that don't be so hard on yourself if you haven't figured it out just yet.
Or I'll tell you, many times, many students is just Jai Mata Di, whichever.
Exactly. There you go.
They are being interviewed by many companies.
There you go. So, and as far as what sector is concerned, because you mentioned that as well, to be honest, most people don't even know what they want to do 10 years later. I've seen people move across sectors, across functions. I know people who've spent 15 years in beauty and then joined a B2B startup. So, I think as people and professionals, we evolve. We have to allow ourselves that. So if I can be, it's great if you have a dream and an ambition in place. But if I could be a little unconventional and say, sometimes it's okay to just go with the flow. You don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to make that decision right at this stage.
Sure. Okay, coming to you, Mohit, before I sort of go into audience questions, because I see many. Let's talk about exit options as well. I mean, there was a question on entry. So if a person is in consulting, okay, and specifically the question is that, hey, if a person is in MBB, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, and they want to come and do sales and marketing, are FMCG and FMCG is open to take that person. And once that person has come in, right, and done sales and marketing for 5 or 6 years, what exit options do they have? Can they only continue in sales and marketing itself, or can they switch gears?
Okay, well, so I think the first part of the question, okay, which is whether, let's say, somebody from MBB or any other consulting firm can enter into, let's say, sales and marketing. See, I think part of it was Xenia, she was answering that. And she said that, the important part is that there has to be, I think, while she mentioned a lot of quality, I think it is about solving problems. Okay, so a marketer on a day-to-day basis is solving a problem. A sales person also on a day-to-day basis is solving a problem, right? So I think the experience from there is directly applicable in obviously a sales and marketing role also. So that is one. Yes, it could be that, the person who's working, let's say, too many on corporate strategy projects and then entering here into sales and marketing career, you might find that the experience there is not related. But I think a lot of time what will happen that if you have a, let's say, structure and the ability to solve problems, you still, I think, succeed. So that's one. Yes, companies are open to it. And I think I also know a lot of people who have moved from consulting background to a FMCG company. So I personally know, I think 4 or 5 names are popping up my head right now. So that's there. Coming to the second part of it, which is that, what are the exit options, right? So if I talk about from FMCG, I think one thing which is very clear that we have seen so far is the fact that, because there are some qualities which are across industry, right? So both sales and marketing, in fact, brand management, yes, there will be nuances in different companies, different kind of brand, different structures, but the basics of marketing will remain same, right? Similarly, for basics of sales will remain same. Yes, there could be a difference between FMCG and FMCD when it comes to sales structures, but again, the basics remain same. And I think somebody was mentioning in the previous conversation where I think, nowadays there are many sort of industries that have opened up, right? Earlier, what used to happen is that consulting karna hai, maybe you move to, let's say, sales and marketing, or you do finance, and these are it. Now, in fact, what is happening that with, a lot of, in fact, I would say a lot of role is being played by startups today, e-com companies also. Okay? In fact, many traditional businesses are also opening their e-com space right now, right? So all of these things have opened up a lot of options for people. So yes, people from FMCG or FMCD can move within and across industries, that's one. They can even move to e-com startups and even consulting. And so there are go-to-market experts, there are branding experts in consulting. So all of these options are open. It's about what you want to do. And, I think, like she said, that 10 years later, people don't.
No, I'll tell you what. I mean, being an ex-consultant, I know that the exit options for the FMCG sales definitely is e-commerce or anything, right? But in consulting, either you come from campus or from any other consulting firms, but majorly, I mean, after 5 or 6 years only, you can't come back to consulting. Generally, if an MBB is hiring, they would rather hire a person with decades of experience because they'll be hiring that person as a subject matter expert. But nonetheless, if you're coming from consulting, you can go into sales and marketing, and then probably you can go into a leadership role at maybe some other companies. Awesome. What I will do now is, in the interest of time, I will take up some questions from the audience, and I will try and answer them based on our conversation so that we close many questions at one. And if anybody has any point to add on to it, feel free to, take that question up, right? So the first question is, how do you manage changing job locations as demanded by a sales and marketing role? So generally, in all, that's not only for sales and marketing, but primarily for all the companies also. You have your preference list. Companies have their obviously preference list where the openings are there. If everything matches, you go where you are preferred, right? If it doesn't match, you may have to follow suit. Majorly now, all top recruiters, all the panelists would agree that companies also want to actually take your preferences and align internally, right? If they are not able to align internally, only then they will come back to request you to shift. Otherwise, obviously, they will come back. And those are the shifts because of which I think the diversity is also increasing. All good? Anything to add by any of the panelists? Okay, awesome. Sorry, I'm just going through more questions. I think sales roles are known to be deprived of work-life balance. How true is this? How to encourage ourselves to keep on doing sales? This anybody has to take. I can answer it very generally, but if anybody can take this up, anybody wants to take a jab at it?
I'm okay to take a jab at it, Ankit. I hear this and I hear you say sales lives and work-life balance, but I tell you, I think it's the same across. I wouldn't be surprised if the same question came into, say, marketing, or someone came in from finance, or someone came in from supply chain with the same kinds of issues. And I think, as a professional, as you grow, it's all about, you finding the way to balance between work and life. And it's not just true for, like I was saying, sales or marketing or any function in particular. It's just the way you manage it. I'm a mom. That's my first job. and I can tell you that, it's not always easy, and it wasn't easy to begin with. But I think you have to learn to prioritize, and you have to push yourself, push your managers, and then push your teams, as you have teams, to also strike that right balance. And it's very doable, it's very possible, and I think every organization is in support of it. You work as late as you make yourself work. I feel very strongly about that.
Okay, awesome. To close the panel, what I'll do is I'll give everybody 30 seconds. I'll ask you very, very rapid 3 questions. You just need to answer it yes or no, or maybe 2 words or so. And all these questions, mind you, students want to hear. Okay. And I'll start with you, Mohit. So the first question is, would you prefer a fresher or a candidate with WorkX, or either of them are fine? Yes or no?
There is no preference, honestly. If it is relevant for specific role, it will matter. Otherwise, no.
Okay, perfect. The other question is point blank, and you can say no comments. Are you increasing your package this year if you go to campuses?
So there was a lot of news that Asian Paints increased its package last year also during COVID. So yes, we will look at this year also. Number is not there yet.
Awesome. And are you going and definitely hiring more numbers this year, or similar to last year?
So we are hiring this year also. The numbers are not frozen yet.
Okay. And does academic matter for Asian Paints?
It does matter, but it is about overall fit. And be very efficient with their answers.
Yeah, political. Let's go to Akshay. Similar questions, but maybe here and there. So internally, is your company focusing on diversity? And will that reflect in your hiring in campus?
Yes, but not the objective ki bhai X percentage should be of a particular background or Y percentage should be of a particular gender. But yeah, subconsciously that.
Again, freshers or WorkX candidate, or both for ITC?
Both. We've had both. Depends. Relevant WorkX always is an added bonus. But yeah, we've had both. There is no inherent bias this or that way.
Hello, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Saying, yeah, I can. I was saying we've had both. There is no preference for one or the two. Sure. Relevant WorkX is an added bonus, but yeah, no preference this way or that way.
Okay. And last again is, are you going and hiring for higher numbers?
We are going and hiring. Numbers are not yet closed.
Coming to you, Zinia. One thing to avoid during your MBA journey.
Focus on only academics. You should avoid that. It should be, do other things and enjoy. It's such an amazing time.
Awesome. One activity to do while in campus.
The same, no.
Internally, is your company also focusing on diversity? And will that reflect in your hiring numbers?
Very emphatic, yes. Yes, it would. Again, there are no percentages for quota X and Y%, but yes, definitely so.
Okay. Coming to you, Ashwin. Again, would you prefer fresher or candidate with WorkX?
So, Ankit, I think for us, as far as the hiring philosophy goes, it's always good to have a mix of both freshers as well as people with diverse experiences. There's no bias there towards either a fresher or a.
Okay. And
so I think what really matters is just strong fundamentals is what really matters in whatever you.
One thing to avoid during your MBA.
I would agree with Senior. I think people should have fun amidst all the projects and group works and everything. Having fun is important.
Okay, and does academic matter when you go for hiring?
So, while a consistent academic record does provide some kind of insight towards attitude, sincerity, and so on and so forth, I think what really matters is the overall profile of an individual. So you hire for the attitude first, then just pure play academics, right? That's how I see it.
Okay, awesome. Gautam, you're next. If you were a student, how would you rank the following? Growth, culture, exit options, work-life balance, and money. I'll repeat again. Growth, culture, exit options, work-life balance, and money.
So in these options, I would definitely say growth. There's a fantastic book on growth mindset. All the students should go out and read that for sure. If I had to add something more, I would say prioritize your health. And that health comes from feeling good from within, which comes from the culture that you talked about. So you find the right culture, you'll be happy working with those people, and then you'll also grow along with that.
Okay, all right. And also, again, are you increasing your package from last year, and are you hiring more numbers?
Too early to say that, but from a hiring perspective, of course, we are hiring, and campus recruitment for us is a very big part of the whole process. So definitely.
Okay. So here is it for students. I think all these companies are hiring, some similar to what they did last year. Some may hire in more numbers, some may increase their packages, but the news is good and positive that there will be jobs on campus. There will be summer placements on campus. They will hire females, males, freshers, work-ex, tech guys. So they'll hire every and each one of you. So don't worry about it. Okay, thank you so much, Mohit, Akshay, Zenia, Gautam, Ashwin for joining us. It was a pleasure to be in conversation with you. I know it's a chicken and egg conundrum, right? Sales and marketing. While I'm sure we have not been able to give them the right answer or break that, but we have basically given them so few insights about this intricate world of sales and marketing. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely day ahead.